Well, hi everyone. I'm Andy Asher. I'm editor at BloomerBoomer, and today we are talking about our future and how we view later in life. One word might best summarize it in talking to our guest today. The big word is change. It's not only us who are changing, but it's the world around us. Our guest today is author, speaker, and futurist Dr. George Schofield, who talks about our future as being, less predictable instead of coasting into our 70s and 80s. He talks about we face interruption unimagined by our parents and grandparents, and he points out we are looking at discontinued income as an example, discontinued income streams, increasing rates of later in life divorce that happens, bankruptcy, the potential for some sharp declines in the value of our retirement portfolio and property. Oh my gosh, I can only hope it's not that dark and murky, but maybe not. We'll find out. In his book, How to Get There From Here When the Old Rules No Longer Apply, he goes on to discuss how interruptions in our lives will persist, how our capacity for flexibility and adaptability will determine quality of life, and how many of us will live significantly longer, healthier lives than once expected. What does it all mean? We will talk with Dr. George Schofield in just a moment. Now, just want to let you know that this is part of the Plus 50 Good Life movement, a project of BloomerBoomer.com publication where we bring stories and ideas from authors, from thought leaders, from inspirational people. It's a movement for new and evolving things that make for a Plus 50 Good Life, and the shows are about what's working and what's not, how to make the best of it, and in the end, hopefully, something you can take away for yourself. Our guests are idea and thought leaders, experts, people with life experiences to emulate, folks with a unique expertise, or those that give us one of those aha moments or a revelation that can suddenly transform the complex and bewildering into the understandable. And among those is our guest today, author, speaker, and futurist Dr. George Schofield. We'll be back right after this. Well, our guest today, author, speaker, and futurist Dr. George Schofield, and his book, How to Get There From Here When the Old Rules No Longer Apply. George, thanks for joining us. What a topic you've jumped into, and what a large audience that I'm sure is going to be learning by it, and hopefully maybe through your book they won't have to learn hard lessons. They'll maybe learn it by taking a look at what to expect.
That would be good.
Yeah, that would be the key, wouldn't it?
It would. It would. Understanding that as much as we would like the future to be predictable, there actually are no one-size-fits-all concrete answers, because we don't know what's going to be discontinuous next.
Absolutely, and I think that. As we've gotten older, and or I guess maybe it's more about the life in itself, is that we don't learn about some of these things that we are going to confront until we're actually there, because in many cases some of the people who have been there are no longer around to tell us what it's like. It sounds kind of nebulous, but if you get my gist, that's kind of how I've looked at it.
So there are a couple of pieces, Andy. The first is we've come out of a period of continuous change. So the people before us had some experiences, and they could tell us about them like oral tradition, and we could be prepared in that way. If they went away, of course, we didn't get the message from them, as was what you just described.
That's sort of my point that I've been dwelling on in my own head, and you're actually the first person I've been able to maybe ask this of.
So, but there's another piece. If we've grown up with continuous change, and by definition, it's familiar, it's a little predictable, we can problem solve around it. We always had discontinuous change, but sort of only over in the corner. Continuous change dominated. What's different in our world now is that discontinuous change, if you look at our politics, if you look at our health and our aging, if you look at finance, if you look at education, a whole lot of things are discontinuously changing, and by definition, You can't see discontinuous change coming. It isn't going to be familiar. You can't take a bite out of it and problem solve that bite and think that you've made an advance, because you won't have.
Yes, and I think for people who are in their 30s and 40s, and they're, I guess they're all together in that discontinuous change. They're probably experiencing that too, but it's not maybe quite so lonely out there because they
That's
have
true.
other people to do it with.
And we've gone for a whole lot of years knowing the vocabulary of continuous change. We had not only the vocabulary, we had the images, we had the problem-solving experience, we had mentors. They've actually gotten there. From millennials, for instance, have gotten there before many of us with discontinuous. For us, discontinuous looks like we could outlive our money. For us, discontinuous looks like if I retire at 65 and I could live another 35 years, do I really want to coast and have golden years for 35 years and expect to be engaged and stimulated and be able to pay for it? Discontinuous change also for us looks like gray divorce, changes in the relationships we've relied on for a long time. All of those are happening to us. We don't see them coming, and they kind of go off like a bomb in our lives. It's game changing.
That really is. And I think you point out in some of the things that you write about is that our parents experienced something so much different than what we're experiencing and will experience. And I think in a nutshell, there is a little bit more predictability in generations past.
Yes, before World War II and after World War II, when our economy was on the continual uptake, clearly there were wiggles in it, we could plan. We could make a long-term plan. You could go to work for Boeing or Ford or whomever and plan on retiring 30 years later with a pension. You would have identified a career path that remained constant. And while things had been changing and would change in small, continuous ways, nothing would have blown it up. We don't have any of that now.
Yeah, that's kind of ominous, isn't it?
Well, I don't think so, because if you actually go back in history to the Industrial Revolution, people used to be on the farm, and all of a sudden they were all moving to the city, and they didn't know what a job was. They didn't know what a wage looked like. I'm sure that looked ominous to them, although there was some appeal to it. We don't know what's coming next. At least they could see it. So we're at this major shift point in our history.
Well, then I guess, is there a way to prepare? How can you prepare for the unknown?
Yeah. Well, the operative word, one operative word is prepare. The second operative word is adapt. So where you and I might have had parents who prepared by having a plan, by having it laid out step by step, and success was perfect execution on the plan, our version of preparation is knowing who we are, what our resources are, what new information is coming in, having a plan that's incremental, not long-term, and adapting ourselves and the plan as new data shows up and we need to make the adaptation.
And the other thing that we think about in these longer lifespans that we're confronting is the fact that, we may not at that point of retirement be all that thrilled about living a life of leisure. I mean, it sounds good the day after you leave the job, but 5 years down the road, there's a little bit of a monotony there that I can't address because I haven't been there because I've been working. But still in all, I do believe that is a case. It seems like there's some truth to that.
Right. There are lots of retirees who have a really good time for 18 to 24 months and then have had it and go back to some form of work, whether they go to take a job or they start a business or they buy into a business. They may do a little volunteering on the side. There are lots of people who start out volunteering and love it, but it's not satisfying enough and they need to go back to some form of revenue producing work or they need some sort of work which will provide them with health care benefits.
Well, you are something of a lonely voice out there in many ways, because I don't hear a lot of people really talking about that, and it seems like something that should be listened to.
Well, nextavenue.org, which you may know, which is a part of the PBS system,
Sure.
just named me as one of the 50 thought leaders in the U.S. for 2017. And then I was supposed to write about what it was like to be a thought leader. And part of it is, frankly, you stumble around in the dark for a little while, and then it becomes clear, but then you have to find a way to explain it, because often people aren't aware that they don't know what they don't know. They're not aware that this is something they're going to have to acquire and become good at.
So maybe there is no oracle of expertise. You who specialize in this, maybe are the closest thing, but there is really no one that can really predict, isn't there?
Well, there are lots of people who can predict, but there aren't people who can give you step-by-step guarantees. One of the things that we as a nation and as people learned to love is problem solving. And it's become really a way we live. Diagnosis, treatment, cure. It could apply to military, it could apply to work, it could apply to our home life, it could apply to marriage, it could apply to a whole lot of places. That's our primary way of addressing something we don't know about. And we can't problem solve large, discontinuous change. So what happens then is there are no, this is actually a struggle for me. People said, I don't want to learn all this. Just tell me the 6 steps and I can get it done. There are no 6 steps for this. And there is no getting it done or place to arrive where you're done. This is the brave new normal that I talk about.
I'm really glad you say that, because that's what I have felt, and I haven't really been able to articulate it, but I've really, that's what's been rattling around in my head for so long, is that you have to figure it out as you go. And we're smart people, and I guess it's up to us to do it or suffer the consequences.
Right. My previous book was After 50, It's Up to Us.
Uh-huh.
That came from the fact that I was aware that we weren't going to have pension systems or churches or other institutions that were going to take care of us. We were going to have to get early on, take responsibility for ourselves. And then that's evolved into, how do I get there from here when the rules no longer apply? And the rules not only no longer apply, there aren't many rules.
Well, yeah. Shifting a little bit, something that I'm interested in asking you about is the kind of definition, if you will, of a baby boomer, and or anybody. That's just a made-up couple of words. It's a descriptive couple of words. But, my sense is that we are like anyone. We have all the same things that we like to do. We have all of the same interests. It's just that we're a little different, and as you get older, you have a couple of other things going on, perhaps, and you have life experiences. But in the bottom line is, we're the same as anyone else.
Well, so you've actually triggered one of the things that I'm passionate about. Part of continuous change was it was so stable, we could rely on quick and easy opposite tags: hot, cold, liberal, conservative, gay, straight, married, unmarried, white, black, whatever all those were. And we've learned to think and write in those terms. When you come right down to it, there's no such thing as a baby boomer. It's another one of those mass labels. Tell me, is there not diversity in people born between 1946 and 1964?
Huge.
And why would baby boomers be any less diverse than any other set of that many years in which we've been born in the United States? So we've fallen into the trap of easy binary, meaning opposite labels in our language and our thinking. And I think we're going to have a really hard time letting go of the easy labels for a deeper kind of thinking we're going to need to be able to adapt in discontinuous times.
And I think not only us, but also the younger people who kind of still look at it as they, meaning us, they, but really we're the same as everyone else.
Right, right. So if we look at the millennials, there are probably patterns that are true for many people born in that age range, but they're not identical. They are as diverse as we can imagine, just as baby boomers, the label that we're lumped under, are incredibly diverse.
Yeah, it's well, you are speaking to the choir about that, and you what was that?
Good for us.
Yeah, well, I think that I talk to a lot of people as well as you do. That's part of what you do, and
Yes.
I don't often correct people, but I do sometimes tell people, keep in mind we're really no different than anyone. We, as I just said, made that spiel earlier. We're just
Yes.
there's just some things out that are different about us, but overall we're the same.
So, Andy, I think one of the things that we're coming to, but we're not really dealing with yet, is we're going to have to make some sacrifices. We're still going to have continuous change, and we can use problem solving for that, but we're going to have more and more discontinuous change, and we're going to have to sacrifice easy labels, taking off a bite of something and doing problem solving, using our past to predict our future and our experience to predict our future, and we're going to have to stop in our tracks and begin to figure out what's going on here and what we're going to do with it at a big picture level, because if we don't, we're going to be stuck with all those little bites and outdated tools that belong to continuous change, not to discontinuous change.
And I think you just answered my next question. I was going to ask some pointers or some takeaways, and that what you just said is really valuable.
So let me say one other thing that I hope will help our audience. When people come to me, whether it's via Skype or coming into my office because they live in my area, to do life planning, usually they start around 50. They've got a great financial planner. They also want someone who's an expert in doing some life planning in discontinuous times. The very first thing they usually want to do is begin to imagine their happy future. And while I'll spend a little bit of time with them on that, I don't think the place to start with life planning in discontinuous times is way out in the happy future. I think we need to take assessment, an inventory of where we are now, not just money, marketable skills, relationships and networks that are still engaged in the world that could help us if we needed them to, health. There are a whole variety of assets that I ask people to look at so we know where the heck they are, because even if you knew where you were going, if you don't know where you are now, it's pretty hard to get there.
And answering some of those questions could lead to a more happy future.
Yeah, and a much more adaptable, facile person. We can no longer write a plan, whether it's a retirement plan or a business plan, and shove it in a drawer. It's not going to work.
Fantastic. Well, George, how can people find out more about you and follow you and so forth?
Well, the first place to go is to my website, George Schofield, GeorgeSchofield.com.
Fantastic.
All you want to know about me is there, in addition, you can go to your bookstore or to Amazon or one of the online sellers and inquire about how do I get there from here.
Very good. Hey, you have some great pointers, really valuable information that helped me a lot, and I really appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Thank you, Andy, and the reverse is true also. I appreciate your time and your thoughtful questions.
Thanks a lot. And our guest is author, speaker, and futurist Dr. George Schofield, and his book, How Do I Get There From Here When the Old Rules No Longer Apply? We'll be back right after this. Well, I hope you liked the show, learned a thing or two. The full show will be available on YouTube and at BloomerBoomer. The audio version will be available on Apple Podcasts. We have other shows coming up with some just amazing guests. So please like us on Facebook and visit us at bloomerboomer.com. Until next time, so long.